Welcome back to a brand new episode of the MMA Beat. It is Thursday, June 22nd, 2017. Hi again, everyone. Welcome to our brand new New York City studio. Look at this place. We've revamped this one as well. Not only the MMA Hour, but the MMA Beat as well. And I would venture to say that this is the nicest iteration of our MMA Beat studio. It is so exciting to be here, and it is so exciting to be here with the A-Team. It has been a while since we've done a show, guys. Luke and I were trying to do it from our homes for the last couple of weeks. And
it went so well.
My internet connection.
I thought that was a new studio.
Yeah, no, that was not. My mother-in-law's bedroom was not the new studio. But look, we tried to give the people what they want, do the show. There's been a lot going on in the world of MMA. But it is so great to be back, and not only back here in our New York City brand new studio. Okay, so there you have Luke Thomas of SiriusXM and MMAfighting.com. There you have the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall of MMAfighting.com and The Ringer. And there, of course, is the one and only man in the shirt, Jeff Wagenheim of the Washington Post.
Bright shirt today, Jeff.
Yes, we actually switched seats.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. This is very exciting.
I'm not sure I can do it from this end. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, let's see. All right, here we go. So a lot of us, actually 3 of us, just came from the Bellator NYC press conference in Midtown, Times Square to be exact. Let's talk about that for a second here because, you know, there were some moments, I think, but the one everyone's talking about is Wanderlei Silva and Chael Sonnen, the little shove. Did this increase your interest? Did you feel like it was a little too much theatrics? Was it subdued? Was it good? Did it pay? What are your thoughts after finally seeing these guys face off for the first time in, 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the days of Wanderlei Silva beefing with Michael Bisping, and I remember the press asking him, why are you so upset with Michael Bisping? And his answer was, I don't really know. I'm just, I don't really know. I just don't like his face or something. He was just, and look, and how much of this is contrived? Probably a significant, if not the majority of it is. There's just a lot of show to this. Okay, fair enough. But you can really tell that also that there is sort of a real palpable distance between them, both physically and in terms of their lives. And I do think that, given how much has been talked about, now they are headlining the pay-per-view at Madison Square Garden, they don't really want an L on this one, especially Chael. Like, you can tell Chael is not trying to put extra pressure on himself, but I asked him, I was like, if you lose this, are you going to retire? And he was like, no, but if I look bad, I might. Something along those lines. And I think he's still got the bad taste of Tito in his mouth, so it's a lot of combinations for Chael. Chael versus Wanderlei, I mean, everyone's going to make their own choice about how much it excites them. To me, I'm more interested in, is Bellator growing in the way that we think they are? But, pushing and shoving was, I mean, everyone else was just kind of like looking at each other like, I'm looking at you now. It wasn't, this was the only one that had a little bit of heat to it. So I'm a little bit more interested in it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this thing has been on the horizon for so long at this point that it felt like it kind of changed just a little bit for me, like just seeing them physically, because you could hear them from where we're sitting, just basically like, let's do it right now. You want to do it right now? Let's go right now. Yeah. And, you see the shove and all that stuff. I thought that it's always hard to tell with Chael, like you were talking about. It's, he a lot of it is contrived and a lot of it, but I felt like I'm picking up on his sincerity a little bit more in this fight. I do believe him when he says that he's motivated, and that's something that has been lacking in his previous, he said 10 years. I don't know really how long it goes back, but, I would say that he has been so consumed with, the media and getting, presenting himself the way he has, that probably some of the actual fight stuff he's lost some motivation. I feel like I've seen that through the course of time. So he mentioned that, and I think that that's going to be something to, that's something to be excited about a little bit if you're a Chael Sonnen fan, because I feel like he's actually going to go in there and do it, and it's good that he's doing it against a guy like Wanderlei Silva. And from Wanderlei's standpoint, I just can't see any way that he's actually not somewhat upset by this process. He said probably 8 words during that press conference, and I just feel like he's over it and he just wants to lay hands on him. So, yeah, it got me a little more excited, I would say, on whole.
Yeah, I feel like that fight needed a little something to reignite the fire there. I mean, I'm not always big on these kind of shoving things. When John Jones and Daniel Cormier went after each other, it was a big thing. It probably generated a lot of revenue, but I didn't really need it. That was a fight that I was interested in seeing, regardless if they could have walked up and hugged, and I still want to see them go at it. Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor, all that stuff. I wanted to see that fight no matter what they did at the press conference. This is one, Wanderlei Silva hasn't fought since, who knows, when was it, 2013?
March 2013.
13, yeah.
On Fuel TV.
Yeah, and Chael Sonnen, we saw his last performance. It was not a very good performance. So, what is the interest in this fight? Well, it's basically the fact these guys don't like each other, and that's really what they showed.
Crazy to think that Conor McGregor's entire UFC career has taken place within the time we last saw Wanderlei Silva.
That is incredible. That's right, because he fought in March and then Conor debuted in April. Let me ask you about Chael, because it does seem, at least to me, like he's a little more subdued going into this one. Like the last time we saw him at a Bellator pre-fight press conference, that was against Tito, of course, his debut. And there were all kinds of lines about Jenna Jameson and Tito. This time, I was kind of waiting for something. And I think all the execs were there, and they're in New York, and I didn't quite get it. Yes, he had some lines with like the Brazilian reporter, and there's some moments.
Sweet potato.
I felt like I was waiting for something, and it never quite got there. And then maybe the shove, I feel like they were on the same wavelength where they're like, we need to do something here. Am I crazy? Were you guys sitting there kind of waiting for a moment that never actually...
No, I mean, didn't we get some of that at the initial press conference at Madison Square Garden a few months ago?
Yeah, but they weren't in the same room.
No, fair enough, but you got a lot of the theatrics from Chael. And
does that even help now in terms of pay-per-view buys?
I mean, I guess it helped at the time. I don't know if it does anything now, but I really think that Chael is I mean, I know this sounds crazy because we're talking about a guy that, look, we thought when Chael went to Bellator that this was a signing that made all the sense in the world. We thought this is perfect for each guy, or this guy in this organization at the moment in time, and we thought he was going to have a second chapter as a given. It appears to be no longer a given.
No.
And so I think he realizes it's not a given. He didn't just lose to Tito. He lost poorly. And so I think he's really going in there. Yes, he wants to do the shtick. He did it with you more than anybody else, really. With the whole, how are you going to make Broadway narrow? Ba-dum-bum. It's like, oh, Dad, please stop. But I think he actually does realize I have to perform.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this gravy train is going to stop.
And it's been fun for him, though, like in the sense, like, you saw him, though, in the other way of, he tells the story about when Royce Gracie was going to fight Matt Hughes, and then he leads that into this heavyweight battle that probably is somewhat under the radar because it was already going to go through once. And he points out Matt Mitrione is the best heavyweight going against the greatest heavyweight of all time. He does things like that still register on some level to me, because when you really think about it, you're like, that's probably not entirely true. But that's like everything that he says. Sure. But you could make a case always that, well, maybe he's onto something with that, So I did see that machination, or whatever you want to call it, of Chael Sonnen in there too, just still his second chapter being a spokesman for Bellator.
And he's also a showman. Luke used the word shtick, and that's really what Chael has been doing over the years. He's a professional. He knew that he could push Anderson Silva back in the day because he knew Silva was going to also act like a professional, and eventually they'd get in the cage and they'd settle their differences. With Wanderlei Silva, it's a different thing. If he started at these press conferences doing his normal Chael Sonnen thing, who knows? Wanderlei Silva may have attacked him more violently, and the fight could have been canceled altogether. I mean, I think that Silva's a kind of an X factor here in terms of his own behavior, and I think Sonnen just feels like, okay, I'm not going to poke the bear too much. Maybe I'll do it right before the fight, but I'm not going to do it in advance too much because who knows what he'll do.
But is the shtick wearing thin? It's one thing to keep doing the thing like undefeated, undisputed, and we kind of laugh at it. But you have to win, and you can't look like how you did against Tito Ortiz. And that's not a knock on Tito. Chael just didn't look good in that fight, and Tito took advantage. Fair play to him. But there is something to be said for the amount of money that they're paying Chael and the spot that he's in. He's in the main event of their debut at Madison Square Garden. Conor McGregor and Eddie Alvarez main evented the UFC's debut at Madison Square Garden. Like, he kind of has to win this fight. I feel like there's way more pressure on Chael than Wanderlei.
Super.
Oh, yeah.
Super. I mean, also, we just mentioned Wanderlei's been gone for an Olympic cycle.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a new president. I mean, that's really how it's been. It's an enormous amount of time. What are your expectations really going to be? And he was never like a fight scientist, but nevertheless, he's older, 4 years off. So I think in some part of your mind, you're probably saying, I don't know how this is going to be. Chael, this is the second time back. He's had whatever the wrongs were the Tito fight. This is his chance to get it right. And to your point, you get a little more like a dry smile when he does that shtick now versus the sort of gut-busting laughter. I think he needs a moment of triumph. He needs a moment of triumph, not just winning like a split decision. He needs some kind of emphatic moment where he can grab the mic from, I guess it'll be Mauro Ranallo or Jimmy Smith or whoever it is, and then he can say to the next person in line. He was actually beefing with Rory McDonald at an event I had yesterday. He said he wants to fight with Rory McDonald, and said, I'll tell you about it later. I wonder what that will be,
Okay.
But he needs...
He's always looking...
He needs some kind of moment to plant a flag.
He was the first to really do that. I felt like, like Conor McGregor, a lot of it is just having the foresight. I feel like that's something we have to always remember about Chael Sonnen because he always had the next stage planned of his career.
Right now, this is a very big deal for Bellator. I mean, you could tell Scott is up there and he's talking about, what this means for the company, all that stuff. But he said something that kind of caught my interest, and it's not the first time he's said it, but he said it again at the press conference.
Also, when Kevin K shows up, it's a big deal.
It is, and I want to ask you about Kevin in a second, but Scott said that this is the best pay-per-view of 2017 thus far. Of course, come August 26th, nothing else matters, and you can make a strong case for DC and Jones, but those haven't happened yet. And when you hear it initially, you're like, well, that's kind of crazy. I mean, the UFC has had several pay-per-views. But then when you actually break down 208, 209, 210, 211 was a great one. Didn't do great on pay-per-view from what I understand. Is it possible that this is actually the best pay-per-view of 2017 thus far?
I don't think so. I think 211 was probably better. But that, you have to think about it for a second, is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
There is a lot of value here. The problem is, here's what I would say. Larkin versus Lima is arguably the best fight this month in any MMA promotion anywhere. That's a ridiculously good fight. So they have that going for
Can I ask you a question about that fight? Would that fight headline an FS1 card?
Yes.
You think so?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say because would it be for a title? I mean, you mean if these guys are in the UFC and not champ?
Yeah.
If they were not champs, I don't know, because Lima is such a demure character. But if you're talking like meritocratically, is that something you? I mean, Chiesa versus Lee is really, really good. But I got to be honest, man. Larkin beat Jorge Masvidal and then bulldozed Neil Magny on his way out the door. Yeah, I'm kind of excited to see that guy.
No, and I'm not doubting that. I'm just wondering why everyone is so excited. And like, did the UFC just kind of not see what Larkin was all about? Like, did they miss the boat on this guy?
Larkin's an interesting guy. He's a little hard to promote. His fight style is incredible. And that's the same with Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler, we talked about this on the train right here. I don't want to take your point, but he says a lot of things that are, the smooth delivery and doesn't say a whole lot, but then he gets in the cage and just does this animal unleashed. The problem is, premise is not much of a challenge. And Chael versus Vanderlei, part of you is like, okay, it's interesting, but when's the bottom going to drop out?
Right.
Same with Fedor and Mitrione. Here's what I will say. After the fact that the fights are exciting, then we can go back and say maybe Coker had a point. But if they wind up being on the bad end of what we think they could be, I think it'll end up being looking like a very ridiculous statement.
And it's interesting to note that Lima and Larkin are actually headlining, starting off the pay-per-view. So they're putting that title fight first to get things going. What do you think? Do you think it's possible to say, can you actually say with a straight face this is the best pay-per-view of 2017?
I mean, I'll agree with Luke in that, in retrospect, maybe after the weekend we might say that it was, but looking in, I mean, the top two fights are really, the top fight is two guys who are, have crested the hill of their careers, and the next fight is, Mitrione still, I think, has a little bit more left in him, but Fedor, we don't know what he's got left. He hasn't shown that much in his last few outings. So right off, what your top two fights are ones that are, that have some name appeal, but really aren't not as much meat to them. I have a hard time calling that the best pay-per-view. I think as a whole, though, this fight card is pretty darn good. I mean, that the fight that's not on the pay-per-view is, between two top 5 light heavyweights. They may be the two best fighters in Bellator in the sense of rankings. I don't know what other Bellator guys are top 5 in the world in their weight class,
Rory.
but we have two. Well, okay, Rory.
Yeah. But
these guys right behind them. I mean, that's not a bad fight.
It's a little bit of a shift of perception because somebody had asked him, "Is this the biggest pay-per-view or the biggest event you've done, or something?" He said, "I think this is I think it was you actually," and he mentioned that it was the biggest event that he's ever done, going back to the Strikeforce, which is kind of crazy. But if you think about the Strikeforce events, a lot of times he did have some of the has-been type names, the guys who are the legend of the sport, but there was a ton of prospect type people. Because if you go back and look at, when Rousey's coming up or any of those, some of those cards are really amazing. But it was more because people didn't know who they were yet. They didn't know that they were going to become the people they did. So it seems strange to think about that. But then after he said that, I kind of thought about it. I was like, he's probably right in terms of people who are already established with enough intrigue characters who are coming over from the UFC, with enough, like Aaron Pico debuting on the card, giving it that extra layer. And then you get a guy like Zach Freeman who just out of nowhere, it's like the everyman who's just up there. And he actually has one of the big moments at the press conference today, just talking about his job. And I thought, that's so Scott Coker card. I've got the best card. We got this guy who has a day job up here stealing the show. It's so bizarre, but that's kind of, to his point, I feel like this could be from that perspective.
One thing you should always do as an exercise is I can't speak for everybody. I think for me, I didn't cover Strikeforce the right way. I'm not happy with the way I covered it.
What do you mean?
there's always this just jaundiced worldview when you look at Strikeforce. You know, we always looked at it like, well, it's kind of cool, but
Everybody did back then.
To varying degrees.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do that with Bellator, but I also don't want to say Bellator is bigger than it is. Here's a little exercise you can try, though. Go back and look at old Strikeforce cards and look at how insanely good they were.
Yeah.
And at the time, you were kind of like, well, I don't know how good this is. And then you go back and you look at it, and you're like, oh my God.
Some of them are amazing.
Yeah.
You couldn't believe who was on some of these cards. So to me, here's nothing to consider. We haven't talked about him. What if Aaron Pico ends up being the next big thing? And we'll say, oh my God, this guy was on that card. You go back and look. Let's say Chill versus Vanderlei is good. I don't need the co-main event to be good. Larkin Lima is good. Michael Chandler does what he does. And then you have Aaron Pico, who could be the next big thing. You'll go back and say, wow, okay, he may have had a point here.
Pico kind of oozes superstardom, right? Like when you see him there with the suit.
He reminds
Reports himself as a professional. 20 years old. That's crazy.
It feels like Batman, or Bruce Wayne before he's changed into the Batsuit. You know?
I can say this with 100% certainty. I am most intrigued in that fight because of him.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we know Lima Larkin's going to be great. Chandler, we know, but he is just such an unknown. And when's the last time? I joked with him that this is the most anticipated pro debut since CM Punk. But being honest,
Wow, did you really?
that was a joke, obviously. but it was pro debut for Punk, and it was anticipated.
He didn't hit you, huh?
But when's the last time? Like, here's another thing. How funny is it that people call, or at least I've called him, and I think we would all agree, he's somewhat of a prodigy. He is debuting on the weekend that the original prodigy is kind of on the way out. He's the prodigy 2.0.
Only you make these segues.
Wow.
You do this. I don't know.
But isn't that weird?
No, it's weird.
And I feel like when I talk to him and when I look at him and he's cognizant of the fact that he needs to dress well, and he's talked about. He told me that he watched press conferences as a kid and looked at how people dressed and said, I'm going to wear. I'm like, wow, this guy, he's 20 years old.
Well, why not? I mean, he's prepared himself in every way. When you think about it, you know, a lot of guys who make their debut in this sport, they come, and if their debut is something that a lot of people are excited about, it's because this person excelled in one particular discipline. You know, back when Ronda Rousey came in, you know, judo, judo medal in the Olympics, and you know, here's a guy that has a lot of honors in wrestling, but then you look also, he's also got the stand-up. You know, he's a national champion in boxing, and he's also, you know, he's done pancration. He's done all these different things that have prepared him for this. He's not just some guy that we're trying to convert from another sport where he was doing great.
Also, look at his coaching staff.
Yeah.
Crazy Bob Cook, Eddie Bravo. Who else was in there?
He had a boxing coach whose name escapes me. Not a massive name, but I mean, yeah, he's not only an AKA guy, he's also spending a lot of time in Southern California.
So Bob Cook and Eddie Bravo, they don't waste their time. They don't have time to waste. If they're showing up to this kid's corner, right? I mean, that's the most insane corner.
Yeah.
Crazy Bob Cook and then Eddie Bravo, Tower 7.
And I know that all that glitters is not gold, but if the people out there, if you guys haven't seen the video that our team, Esther and Casey, put out on him training at Wildcard, 20-year-olds who are making their debut don't look like that, don't box like that. You know what I mean? Like, he just looks like a guy.
You know, when you talk to a guy, and it's generally a guy who's a veteran or something like that, but you talk to a guy who's had experience, he's done it for a long time, you're actually peeling back layers through his experience to get to something, because you know his confidence. That's how he felt. Talking to him today, he had that sort of feel to him, like he's done this a million times. He wasn't daunted by the fact that, you know, we're in the shadows of Madison Square Garden. He's going to be performing there. None of that really mattered to him. And I mean, at 20 years old, I'm sitting there thinking, when I was 20 years old, like, what would I have been like? And it's like, he's a guy who's almost like an old soul. But I think it's just because he has so much experience and he's worked himself to this point. And if anybody's ready for that sort of expectation to meet it, I feel like that kid is, man. He just really comes across that way to me.
And kudos to Bellator for signing him, almost 3 years ago, and not rushing him into the whole, you know, under the spotlight. You know, giving him the time to, you know, having the foresight to say, this guy may be something special, but then giving him the leash in order to try to become that special thing that they're hoping he's going to become.
Yeah, and of course he is managed by Zinkin, who has been sort of a pipeline in the old days to Strikeforce, the relationship between them and Scott Coker, and they've done this where they were actually paying him like a monthly salary to go out and do his wrestling thing, to try out for the Olympic team, with the understanding that at some point he'd come over, and what timing this is. Now, you mentioned Kevin Kay, the president of Spike TV, soon to be the Paramount Network, and he starts off the press conference throwing all kinds of shade on the UFC.
He's a really friendly guy. I had
to take a double take. The first one, I was like, what?
Saying what? First he said that, like, we're a New York company, we're not a Las Vegas company. What else? He had a couple of zingers.
There's no boxers.
Just MMA fighters.
Although we must give credit to John Pollock of the Fight Network, who noted that on the Spike TV prelims, Heather Hardy is a boxer who
well,
is
on that dais.
Fair enough. But what did you guys think? Because usually Coker's MO is I don't take shots, you know, I take the high road. But here it kind of felt like they were coming out swinging.
So I don't know how you guys feel. The press room looked pretty incredible, and they had these like what would you call them? The screens on the side,
like these pillars.
The pillars. These pillars were wide, and they were like video screens, and you could just tell, like, whatever we think about this pay-per-view, everyone's like, Scott Coker's full of it when he says this is the best thing he's ever done. But there is an absolute feeling in that company, inside Viacom, that they're doing big things and that this feels like they're coming into their own now, you know? Remember, this is the 3-year anniversary, or the month anyway, of Coker taking over for Bjorn Rebney, and look how far they've come. I mean, I can understand why they want to puff their chest out. I think that's what it is. They're starting to feel very, very confident about the product they've assembled, the talent they're getting up there, the notoriety. Look at the places we're in. We're in New York, in Madison Square Garden. Here we are, and we're going to let you know about it. We're going to be a little in your face.
Certainly the feeling of emergence is really the thing, because when I felt that too. You see, and there were a lot of media there today. Somebody had to scrounge me a chair to sit on. But there were a ton of people in there, and you know, it had the feel of a big event. You know, like bigger than anything I've seen from Bellator before. I do feel like there's like a little bit of a defiance that's coming through now from all of those guys, because I feel like they believe that they're starting to be on equal footing, if not more. I know Matt Mitrione, I think was he speaking to you? He answered a question that he said that it occurred to him that they are the leader, you know, in the MMA industry and all this. And
he said, come Sunday morning, we're going to be the leader.
And that. I feel like, maybe that's a little bit of hyperbole or whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, I think that that's the belief. I think that they believe now that they are to that point where they're going to be, you know, there's a lot of bad vibes coming off the UFC, a lot of crazy shakeups and disgruntled employees and everything else. And then here's Bellator kind of, you know, sneaking in with this card, and it has, whether you like the fights or not at the top, it still has a fun vibe. You know, there's fun to it, and I feel like it's infectious to their whole crew. If you're talking about anybody from Bellator, I feel like that's kind of the feeling right now.
Jeff, is it false bravado? Because I mean, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot here, but you work for the Washington Post, and can you tell us what they think about this as far as coverage?
I will tell you that I'm not going to be at the Garden on Saturday night, because when I talked to my editors, he was like, well, we haven't gotten a lot of, we don't get a lot of clicks when we run things on Bellator. Now, I have to say that I've been writing for them for almost 2 years, and I haven't, to this point, written any Bellator things.
Right.
I don't know whether somebody else has done some things. So I actually was not too pleased about this. I thought this was a fight card that really deserved coverage in a more mainstream arena, and so, you know, but what am I going to do? But that is kind of what.
But so does that mean that we're kind of too, you know, in the weeds here, and we I think we may think this is a big deal, but when you kind of step out of the bubble, they can't really claim that they're number one. You know, I know that's not a very.
I think outside the bubble, I think outside of the MMA bubble, the fans who watch this show and who you know get all of the fights, outside of that bubble, amongst the more casual people, the kind of people who are going to probably get the Mayweather-McGregor fight, those folks, I think they think MMA, they think UFC. It's like almost, you know, it's like pro basketball, NBA. There's a kind of that kind of connection there. And the Bellator stuff, I think a lot of people don't know what to make of it. And but I think some of the stuff we're talking about here could change that a little bit. Maybe not dramatically, but I think certainly a little bit. Just think about how we're talking about this pay-per-view today as opposed to the way we talked about it, I don't know how many weeks ago when we were on this program on our old set talking about the fact that that Bellator just announced their second pay-per-view. We were pretty negative about the whole thing. Yeah. And now it's a really, we're singing a whole different tune.
I'm sorry.
I was going to just say that Scott Coker, you know, of all people, you know, he's the promoter. You think he would be the one with the hyperbole, and he hasn't really been. He's been sort of a realist on it. I think it was him who was, maybe it was on your show, but he was saying, you know, 200,000 would be like a great number for them. I'm not like much of a guy like that. I don't know if it will either, because their first pay-per-view, I don't remember the number. Do you guys? It was less than 100,000?
It was 100, or right at it.
Roughly 100,000.
200,000
to double
is a lot.
That's a lot. And then besides, you know, there are, you know, it's you're not known as a pay-per-view company. I think that's the biggest thing. And then you're not the UFC. So it's going to take I don't think it'd get probably to 200, but that seems like a reasonable goal, right? And if you're throwing that out there, that seems like a good number to throw out there.
A couple of points here. I mean, I say this as a Washington Post subscriber. I love the Post. It's my hometown paper. It's an incredible institution.
You didn't get rid of it after I joined?
I tried, believe me. I'm teasing. But the truth of the matter is, I think you can look at a lot of legacy media, even ones where Jeff Bezos is trying to make things happen for them. They don't understand MMA, and they never really have. You know, you could go, but when the UFC was on fire, it took a lot of time for legacy media to catch up to that fact. So maybe Bellator's there. Maybe there's also something to be said for they could do some more work to promote themselves. But I was there, God, when was this? When Rampage fought Joey Beltran at the now defunct Revel Casino in Atlantic City. And it was sad. It was sad.
What was sad about it?
It was in a tiny theater that was mostly well attended, but the casino itself was kind of empty. There's hardly anyone at the press conference. You could tell Rampage kind of had some saucers up there on his eyes, being like, this is a little bit of a downgrade.
Atlantic City's a sad place.
And Atlantic City is, it's an armpit. But here's the thing. To go from that to this, I can see why those folks at Viacom feel like, okay, now we're on to something. I kind of get it a little bit.
Fair enough. One last thing I will say about the folks at Viacom. I think initially we thought, all right, this card, you can poke holes at the main card, the main event. Is it worthy, co-main event, all that stuff. But I think they've done a really good job with what they're calling Bellator 180, which is essentially the prelims. They've added something. You don't like it? Or are you saying?
I can't stand the name differentiation.
Oh, yes, of course. Okay. No, but I just mean like the Machida Gallagher fight, a guy who's 40 against a guy who's 20. It almost just seems weird seeing them square off, right? A man against, a younger man or a boy, whatever you want to call him. And then you have
Shades of CM Punk again.
Sort of, yeah. But this is even bigger discrepancy. The Heather Hardy edition, a great boxer from New York. I feel like they've done Naaman Gracie. They've done a really nice job of not making this your typical Bellator card, which is usually just a main card. It actually feels like for the first time Bellator has a full card. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's different.
Yeah.
And look, we'll see what kind of bells and whistles they put at MSG.
Coker told me it's going to be the grandest setup they've ever had.
I believe it. I'm looking forward to that. And I also think they did some things to just ingratiate themselves to fans these past few months. Not least of which is, not my favorite commentator in the world, but signing Mike Goldberg was kind of smart, to be honest. And putting him on the Spike TV portion of the
most
card.
Familiar voice.
It's crazy, right?
Any casual person who's going through, here's Mike Goldberg, they just think it's the same thing. They think they're getting the same thing that they've always gotten.
Do you like this idea of having Goldberg and Ronaldo, or is it overkill?
It was weird, man. Especially because, Sean Grande I was kind of starting to get behind that. I really started to like that. He
was coming into his own, right?
I really kind of I was starting
super talented broadcaster.
And I was getting into the dig, and then they switch it, and then you get two known guys. You could see why they're doing it. But that's a lot of eggs in one basket. I hope it pays off for them because I know why they're doing it. You know what I mean? Like, just to give it that sense. But also, like, you were mentioning the big bells and whistles. I mean, didn't he say that Dave Navarro was singing the national anthem?
They're singing. He's a guitar player.
Oh, is he? Okay. Okay. So, I mean, they're doing all these types of things, too. I mean, they're trying. They're trying to make it big.
And they're even using the Ali Frazier scale.
That is a great touch.
What a great touch.
Yeah, I really
like that. They can call
this
the fight of the century now, right?
Which one? Or just
one of them. Whatever.
Card
the fight card of the century.
Okay, so it's a busy weekend in MMA. Not only do we have this card on Saturday, but we also have the UFC in Oklahoma City. And you actually look at that card.
I'm sorry, who?
Wow. We're going to be hearing from some people.
I'm teasing.
You actually look at that card, there's some big names, there's some familiar names.
It's actually a good card.
There's some really good.
Three former champions.
Three former champions on the card. But let me just ask you this about BJ Penn, because I think you noted this on Twitter. Like, no one's talking about BJ Penn.
Zero.
And here's one thing. BJ doesn't want to talk. Like, I've tried to talk to him. He's done no media. I don't know if you've tried to talk to him.
I actually was so bothered by how the last fight went that I just chose to not talk.
This is the right approach, right?
This is the right approach?
I believe it is.
For him?
Yeah, for him. Because, I mean, you come off of a performance where it's a sad spectacle. Like, to watch that fight against Yair was one of those types of, one of those moments you're like, I don't like this. This makes you feel uncomfortable to see him in there. This is the guy he should have been facing then, and Dennis Seaver. And if I'm him, I tune it all out. I fly under the radar. And I go in there and I just do it. Because if you fail, it comes with all the bells and whistles. It's just, that's it, right? Like, he lost to Dennis Seaver. He doesn't belong in the UFC anymore. He doesn't belong fighting anymore. But if he wins, at least he's done that. And I feel like, the quiet way is just the way to be. Because what more can you say really at this point? We've built up his comeback so much.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to say other than him to go out and do what he's going to do.
It might be the right approach, or it might not be. We don't really know what his radio silence is all about. If it's him saying, yeah, like you characterize, he's just digging into training camp and trying to prepare himself for the best he can be, great. Then stay silent and just work your ass off. But there's also the possibility he just is like checked out a little bit, and he's I almost forgot that he was on this card. I remembered him, he was fighting Seaver, and then all of a sudden earlier in the week I was looking at the card. I'm like, oh yeah, because it was so far down the card. It was just odd that fight was so far down the card.
Are you surprised though, even with the lack of media that he's doing, that it's completely flown under the radar? Like now it's just a fight. It's no longer BJ Penn. It's no longer do or die. It's just kind of there. It's like
I'm not surprised because remember there was a lot of, well, I won't say a lot, but there was a fair amount of media before the Rodriguez fight for all the reasons we've already stated.
And he was the main event.
Yep, and he was the main event. I spoke to his coaches, and they were like, "Okay, the old BJ's back," and it was like, it was like Baghdad Bob. It was so far. I'm not trying to be insulting. It was. Yeah. It was so far removed from reality that you just you mentioned what could BJ say? What could anyone else around him say? The only difference is I did talk to Gary Marinovich. Marv has retired apparently. I didn't know that, but Gary.
You're with him, right?
No, Marv stayed home.
No, Gary is.
Gary is.
Yeah,
Gary has been with him this entire time, and I asked Gary. I was like, what did you make of his last fight? He's like, he's not being handled properly. Gary still basically believes that BJ is totally revivable. I guess we're going to see if Gary's a mad scientist or he's also part of the problem.
I spoke to Jason Perillo asking if he'll be around, and he has not trained him, and he won't be in his corner. And I don't think he's been in Albuquerque as well, so that is always a mystery with BJ. Yeah. Who's with him? How is he training? How dedicated is he? It does sort of feel like, and I know we've said this before, do or die, right? As you said, if you can't beat Dennis Seaver, he claims that he won't be watching.
He's such a liar.
I don't believe him.
What a liar he is.
When we were talking about BJ Penn making a comeback and the idea of him fighting Dennis Seaver came up, we all kind of were in favor of that, thinking, well, that's a guy that's at a good level for him, a guy who's probably not at his level quite, but it's not too much of a drop down. Well, Dennis Seaver is now the favorite in this fight.
Is he?
Yes.
Are you kidding?
You're kidding.
Yeah.
Is it a big
it's not tremendous, but it's still.
Oh, wow. There we go. There's Dennis Seaver speaking to us and saying,
I am sorry, Jesus, for all my
sins. We will correct that. But wow, that is shocking.
Yeah.
Was he originally the underdog? Do you know?
I didn't look back then, but
so
I was looking at odds of other fights when I was on the train ride in today, and I saw that. I was like, wow, really?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
How the mighty have fallen.
Man.
So we'll see on Sunday. A lot on the line for him. A lot on the line for both Michael Chiesa and Kevin Lee in the main event. I love this fight. It's a fascinating fight. Kevin Lee has really come into his own as a promoter. They're going to Detroit in December, so the timing is working out for him perfectly to get a big fight. Said on Monday that he'd like to fight Khabib on that card. But do you feel like the UFC is doing a good job of using what happened at that press conference to promote this fight? Have they? You have to do it in good taste, right? Like you have to show that you're not overly happy about it, but also use it to sell it. Are they balancing that?
Yeah,
that line.
I feel like they are. Okay. But to be honest, I this is one of these fights where I feel like it has no buzz.
Oh, really?
Do you feel like there's a buzz to this fight? I mean,
if that never happened,
well,
maybe.
I would say that gives it a buzz.
Sure.
Right? Like this is one of those weird juxtapositions. We were talking about how Bellator feels good about themselves. Has there ever been a weekend where a Bellator event so thoroughly overshadowed a UFC?
But I will say this is the best Bellator has to offer. This is their UFC 200.
It's not apples to apples.
And it's funny. And it's funny though. It's one's at Madison Square Garden, one's in Oklahoma, because usually it's some kind of reverse of that.
That is true. That is very true.
But I think that they should play that up because, there was a lot of big names on that stage, and I felt like that obviously stole the show. So I mean, if you've got something where they're going at it, and there's actually this has always gone on. Mike Tyson sold, when he would go at it on this podium, and there would be like these moments of, wow, this is going to be crazy. I still feel like that translates. You know what I mean? Because we all saw it. I know you posted something on social media after that was really funny, but like that press conference, he posted a Jerry Springer clip, and he's like, here's footage of.
It was a bizarre Jerry Springer clip. It was
pretty funny.
I mean, you know me.
But it was sort of like that. It was a carnival, but
I feel like there's some heat going.
There's some heat for sure.
There is. Here's the interesting part about this. It's the elephant in the room here. Not only has the UFC in Oklahoma City suffered from this, but Bellator has too. Mayweather-McGregor has swallowed everything.
I was actually going to ask you guys about that. Has that hurt them?
It's hurt everyone on this weekend. I mean, look, I think Bellator will recover to some extent. And ultimately, the UFC's viewers on Fox Sports 1 are a reliable bunch. I think it will come back. But in terms of like what... part of what being a fight fan is about is in the days and weeks leading up to a fight, it's always on your mind and you're thinking what could be and what's it going to look like and what's it going to feel like. That has been absolutely numbed and drowned out of you because you can't stop thinking about, I cannot believe Conor McGregor's going to fight Floyd Mayweather in a boxing contest.
Even at the media day yesterday, like the story from us, you know, for our perspective that stole the show was Lou DiBella talking about Mayweather and McGregor. Like, I want to ask every fighter what they think about it. So let's talk about it.
Well, everybody has an opinion about this, though.
Yes.
I mean,
I heard Jeff doesn't.
Wait, Mayweather?
8 days after the announcement, so we didn't have our typical show last week, so I'm excited to talk to you guys about this. 8 days later, what's the biggest takeaway? We'll start with you, Jeff. Like, what has stood out? You know, we're in the infant stages here, right? The embryonic stages, if you will, of this promotion. Although it's going to happen fast. I mean, we're only 2 months away at this point. What stood out?
I think the thing for me is that most fights, they pretty quickly develop a narrative in the build-up, and this one really hasn't because there's a narrative that's split into a million different ways. I mean, there are people who think this is a complete sham. There are people who are, you know, embarrassed for boxing. There are people who think, hey, it's a great show, let's embrace it. There are the people who say Conor McGregor's going to shock the world. There are the people who say, well, it's, you know, whatever. Floyd's just going to fend him off and he won't land a punch. I mean, there's so many different ways to look at it, and that's kind of the thing that I'm most interested in. Every single time I see that somebody's being interviewed, like I watched that Lou DiBella one that you did, and I was interested in it just to say, you know, what's this guy's take going to be? And that's been kind of fascinating to me, and I've learned some things. I mean, I guess I was certainly pretty negative about this fight, and I still think it's you know, P.T. Barnum revisited, but you know, sometimes you just have to let go of those things and say, well, you know, it's just a show. I just think that for us, for people in the media, I think we just have to cover it honestly, and if we think this is going to be a complete Floyd shutout and something that, and Conor's just going to be, you know, look amateurish, you got to say that because people are going to be spending their hard-earned dollars. They're going to spend $100 for this fight, unless they go out to Vegas, and they're going to spend a mortgage. So, you know, I think that's the responsibility of us, is to kind of cut through all of the promotional angles and really come at it and say, yeah, is this really, really a fight, a real boxing match, a legitimate boxing match?
I think it's been a great first week, man. I mean, just some of the responses that we've seen out there. I knew this would happen. Okay, so we roped off essentially our imagination when this thing was being talked about. You did not let yourself really, truly contemplate it because you weren't sure it would ever really materialize. And it was sort of absurd. It had to graduate from the absurd into an actuality. And as soon as it did that, now it's this process of trying to wrap your head around it. And it's like it's one of these surreal things. You were talking about how you start to imagine what this lead up will be in, or even the moment, when these two guys, you're like, wow. Imagine when Floyd and Conor are standing across from each other, how strange that'll be. Those things are sort of fun, man. I mean, it's one of these rare confluences or moments in time where it could possibly happen. And because Conor McGregor will never be as big as he is. All it's going to take is another loss or something where he's knocked out or something. It can never happen again. You just have this perfect moment in time. And I think that from a standpoint of a mixed martial arts and boxing, historically, you know, where they butted heads just since MMA's in its infancy. There's a lot of guys who won't look down their nose from the boxing world in MMA. Now we get to sort of go, you know, kind of mesh through each other, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, there's elements like that excite me. It's not to say the fight will be good, but the fact is, like, that there are elements to it that could change it, to me, is exciting. You know what I mean? Like, I did a piece in the Ringer basically pointing out, like, you know, Conor McGregor, there are reasons you could look at him and be like, that some, you know, the people in the boxing world aren't seeing. You could be like, well, here's some things you should consider. And some of them are very esoteric and strange, and, like, you know, him being in, you know, in touch with the cosmos and making things happen. But that's been our reality in MMA. He's done everything he set out to do, so that becomes part of the narrative. And so, like, dealing with old stodgy disbelief and new belief and all that and meshing all that together, it becomes a lot of fun for me.
I mean, we talked a little bit about this, so I won't repeat too much, but if I had to think of the biggest takeaway for me, I mean, there's a lot of different directions you could go.
Yeah.
For me, it's the enormity of it all. I got to be honest, I thought if it ever happened, which I didn't think it was going to, because I'm so smart, I thought it would be somewhere between Mayweather, Canelo, and Mayweather, Pacquiao, somewhere in there, which was, I mean, that was like 2.2 million versus 4.4. So that's a major success. But I didn't think it could beat Pacquiao, Mayweather.
Feel
They
bigger.
set the over-under at 4.99 million.
I mean, are you kidding? I absolutely think.
Who said it? Like one of the lines? Oh, wow.
No, I'm not saying it will beat that. I don't know. I mean, this is not a fight I want to make a ton of bold predictions about.
Yeah.
But I feel like it could beat it. I feel like it could beat anything that we even imagine it could be, from paydays to closed circuits to what happens in Las Vegas to what happens in our world and theirs, and the ripple effect it's going to have. This thing is, I don't want to call it an extinction level event because I don't want to be like dire about the consequences, but the impact it can have feels like an extinction level event.
It's not so much that you love it, embrace it, or hate it. It's that you care, right? This is always the thing that people, everybody has an opinion about this. There's going to be massive intrigue to watch it.
It's a combat sports black hole. It sucks in everything into its orbit.
There have been enough reputable voices saying that this fight is not going to be competitive and all those things. There's been enough voices saying that, and yet it has it not slowed the momentum of the fight one iota. And that's kind of impressive when you think about it. And also the other thing, like, I'll say that, you know, that Conor has no chance of beating Floyd in a boxing match, but you know what? I thought that he had no chance of beating Jose Aldo in an octagon. I mean, he has defied our expectations or our limitations so many times in the past that you just got to say, you know, let's just see him do it.
Well, the great thing is the most resonating things that are coming out of it in the initial week are the boxing guys who've went on these bigger shows. You know, you see Jim Lampley getting on there and just
another genius.
Yeah. You know, going on, it's like the stodgy older guy from the boxing world who's going to give his version. Now, I understand it's being played out in a boxing ring, but this is fun because I know you were on Dan Patrick and you go on these shows and there's going to be a little bit of that where it's like, oh, we're going to get two different perspectives. You don't have to back up either one. All you got to do is.
Have you noticed that? Like, and I've done a bunch of media, and I know you guys have talked to a bunch of people. Like, everyone who I talk to from the sports world, it's like they're demanding that I either shame it or defend it. I can't just cover it. It's like, what do you think about this? How could this happen? Why is this like, whoa. I didn't put the fight together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm just the guy covering a guy who is now doing the unthinkable. Why do we have to defend it? Ask the Nevada Athletic Commission why this is happening. They're the ones who should be defending it, not us. Ask the promoters.
I think that's a new media phenomenon that transcends this fight. I think that's a new media phenomenon that is common. You know, look at the political arena. You can't talk about politics in America without, you know, taking some very dramatic side. They're just, anybody who's talking about things in any kind of balanced way is basically drowned out by the louder voices on each edge, and I think that's the same case here.
But there's something to be said about this because the MMA world has a relationship with kickboxing, and they have a relationship with jiu-jitsu, and they have a relationship with wrestling. They don't have a real relationship with the boxing world. These communities, racially, I mean, all kinds of demographics, are very distinct communities. Okay, now they're being thrust together, and what you realize is two things. One, I talked about this a lot. I don't think MMA fans really have any clue about boxing. I don't want to overly generalize, but there's a lot of MMA fans who don't watch boxing. I have been asked, can Conor win via spinning back fist? Probably 3 dozen times. Yes! I can't believe it. But let me say this in defense of MMA fans too. Let me say this. It's the most insane question ever. Okay, but here's the deal.
Can he? I'm kidding.
I mean, he can do it. He can't win.
Nick Diaz is not going to like it.
Hold on, but let's defend MMA fans here for just a second. Let's talk about the boxing world. They have no clue who Conor McGregor is.
And they admit it. But then they
don't
some of them admit it.
Jim Lampley's like, so Hop, I've never seen McGregor fight, but I looked at some CompuBox numbers, and here is what I could extrapolate.
Do you notice the way they say his name? They almost say it with like
McGregor?
No, they just like they say it. It's
like Conor McGregor.
Yeah, like he's some cartoon character.
These, for example, and I always see this too, and I always see this when that mural came out. I mean, look, the mural's about visualization and all the things he does, the cosmos stuff we talked about. Everyone says to me, well, Conor's taking this fight because he's going to make a bunch of money. Well, of course. I mean, I would get knocked out by Floyd to get that kind of money. But they don't understand that this guy fundamentally thinks he is going to go in there and make everybody eat their words.
The only person I've answered on in any kind of exchange was the SI, who was it, Maggie Gray, had put up a little video post basically saying, this is a money grab, he knows he's not going to win, it's straight up.
So false.
And I said, all I was saying is like, there's been no evidence that this guy thinks he's going to lose.
Yeah.
This guy believes he's going to win. And she said, no, he doesn't. And I was like, yes, he does. Yeah. I know. I've been following him for.
I got it.
When people say money grab, they say it like it's some sort of negative thing, like this negative connotation. But that we're all like our lives are money grabs. Like we're all trying to get the most amount of money possible.
But I think in Conor's case, he is maximizing an opportunity. There is a case to be made that Floyd thinks he's conning everybody.
Right.
Well, Floyd, this is the perfect scenario for Floyd. Find the fight that makes you the most money, that's the smallest threat.
Right.
To be 50-0. So I mean, in a way, it's like obviously.
Yeah, but he's gone out there. He's a hell of a champion.
Yeah.
Okay,
he's
so
a hell of a guy.
that's the one thing I want to stop hearing from them. Stop telling us how dangerous, like Leonard Ellerbe, Floyd, like I want to hear you calm chicken shit. I want to hear you calm.
They don't need to be on his
Stop, because it's so transparent.
Well,
you
got the
need
whole
to tell
MMA
us that
world to
you
defend.
cannot.
Floyd-
tell me he can't land a punch on you, and that will elicit a better response. Like stop trying to
100%.
sell the fight.
Sure, but
Let
Floyd
Dana
doesn't,
and
Floyd
Conor
doesn't
do
pick
that.
fights. Floyd will, unless Conor McGregor goes out there and goads him into a fight. Floyd can spend 12 rounds standing there, shoulder rolling and basically shutting him out.
People love Floyd or love listening to Floyd or love watching him in the build-up to fights, not because he sells his opponent, because he sells himself. You know what I mean? He has to stop telling us.
And I didn't cover the Berto fight, but I covered the Pacquiao and the Canelo one, as I mentioned. He didn't do that in either of those contests.
He's stopped doing it.
He completely stopped doing it. The Pretty Boy Floyd thing,
Yeah.
where he's going back and forth with, what's his face, the Baseball Network? He's on ESPN as well.
Yes, Brian Kenny.
Brian Kenny. Where that guy is gone. He doesn't exist
he doesn't do
anymore.
it.
No.
But there was actually a promo that I tweeted out today. A guy named Mike Fight Promo made this fantastic 4-minute
was
promo.
good. Yeah, it was
and
good.
I must say, one of the things I'm looking forward to in the build-up is all this fan-made stuff, like that guy Boss Logic and his amazing posters. But there's some footage, again, embryonic stages of this feud where Floyd is calling him the B word and he's saying he's a joke. I want that Floyd to come back. I don't want to go to the press conference.
Nobody's going to draw it out of him. It's going to be Conor McGregor, right?
Yes. And is that a real thing? Is that like, I remember someone asking me, do you think that Conor, we were in Vegas and some fans were coming up to me and they weren't Irish, so I wasn't like trying to butter them up. Is Conor going to win? And I said, I think he's going to win. And they said, why? I just said, I don't know, I just feel it. I have no technical analysis here. And so one of the things that he does is he gets under your skin. And we saw how it can play out, right? He literally got under, I mean, not literally, but he was under Aldo's.
Literally.
Yeah, no, not quite. Figuratively under his skin. He was in his head, right? Is Floyd susceptible to that? Is that possible?
I wondered that, honestly, because he's been through so much. He runs his own promotion. He's been around that. He's been at this level for so long. It's like, is he a sphinx at this point? Can you get into his mind at all? I don't know. I really don't know. But I think if there's one guy who can, it's going to be the best shit talker in the world, right? And I think that's going to be, it's McGregor. It's not that he's just going to sit there making up false, calling them names. He plays psychological games. He starts telling you what he sees in your propensities. He starts saying that he knows you're going to do this. He'll start telling him, like, I know you're just going to wait for me to come in. He'll start playing those games. He's playing the fight out before it ever happens, right there in front of you, and that makes you second guess. It's those kinds of games that I think it will draw him out a little bit.
Yeah, and just as the boxing skill matchup is really a mismatch, 49-0 Floyd Mayweather, the best of his generation, against 0-0 Conor McGregor. I don't think we can frame the boxing as anything other than a mismatch. The talking part of it, the mental game part of this fight is just as much of a mismatch in the other direction. I mean, Floyd has had people say things to him in the past, but he has never faced somebody who could throw as many hard punches in the verbal sparring as Conor McGregor. McGregor, that is his best chance of winning this fight. If he is going to do something, or not even win, just if he's going to do something that's going to hold him in high esteem, is going to be because he is going to get into Mayweather's head, make Mayweather want to hurt him, and then, do something smart.
And there's not going to be any kind of contextual reverence. Like sometimes when guys are going to fight Floyd Mayweather, they know about Floyd because they've been in boxing the whole way. They're going to know exactly what Floyd has done. This guy's not going to be affected by any of that. And he's just like he wasn't with Aldo. Nobody talked about Aldo in any sense of and reduced him to the dog in the scenario. And I feel like that's what McGregor did. And then he goes out and blows him up in 13 seconds. These things, I don't think you can take them lightly. The game is so mental as it is, and you're like, now can he affect him mentally before going in there? Because then, if you know that there's some mental, like it becomes personal for Floyd Mayweather in any way, this fight becomes that much more fascinating.
It was funny when McGregor announced the fight on Twitter, a picture of Floyd Sr. The truth is, that's the real battle right there. What does boxing have that MMA really doesn't? Old men.
Yeah.
Okay? Old men will just tell you what they think of something. They don't care anymore. Floyd Sr., I have interviewed him probably a dozen times, and every time, he is absolutely the most disparaging person about the guy who his son is fighting. without any hesitation. That's those are the him versus Conor. That's going to be the good one.
You know, when we first started talking about Conor in the early portion of his UFC career, we talked about how he was such a student of the game. Like, he can rifle off his opponent's reach and height, and even other people in the division, right? I mean, he's just like, he's manic when it comes to that. And even little things, I'm so interested in seeing how far he goes. Remember, just a few months back, he put out this cartoon picture, like an emoji, if you will, of him standing over Floyd, knocking him out, and said, "Just call me C.J. Watson." And that was the most obscure reference possible. C.J. Watson, an NBA player, who there's a story about him and one of Floyd Mayweather's girlfriends. Like, that's how deep he went. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't even know what he was talking about. I knew the picture. I saw Floyd,
and he's referencing
tell
that. You how much he's obsessed with it. He'll start to, those details will start to come out. You know, he's done that the whole time.
It's amazing.
He lets you know that he's almost photographic in that way, and he's an encyclopedia when it comes to his study.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Floyd is no dummy. I don't know what Floyd did in those contracts. I guess we'll have to see. But I wonder how much he is shielding himself in those contracts and these kinds of possibilities. I mean, Conor will find a way around it, I think, no matter what. But I'm just saying, everyone in MMA is kind of on Conor's side on this one, and I am as well. I think Floyd versus Conor, when it comes to the mind games, there's no doubt about it. Conor's going to be your unequivocal champ. But Floyd is a shrewd guy. It'd be very, very foolish to underestimate him.
Well, the media tour hasn't been announced just yet. They are going to go to several cities, but and we'll see what they decide on. But what I have been initially told was that it has to be neutral cities. So I don't think they're going to Dublin. I don't think they're going to Vegas or Grand Rapids. So and I don't know if that's a Floyd request, because I don't know how well he would be received in Dublin, but I thought that was very interesting. One other thing about the fight that I thought was interesting as well, I think the boxing community, as far as like the fighters, the managers, of course, not named De La Hoya or not named anyone who works for HBO, because this is somewhat personal for them because of the Triple G Canelo fight. For the most part, I've been kind of surprised. And it's been interesting to see, like, they're not really crapping on the fight. Like, I think DeBella put it, like, yeah, it's not really a real boxing match, but I'm going to watch it. I'm going to be there. Heather Hardy said the same, and I've seen other boxers kind of say the same, like, yeah, good for them, great. You know, it's not really the most competitive fight, but it doesn't offend me. Who I have seen claim that they are offended are the boxing media. Have you noticed that? Like, I've heard boxing media say, "I'm not going to cover this. I'm not going to apply for credentials."
They're all
liars. I feel like the MMA media, we're able to look at this and be like, okay, this is so ludicrous that our guy essentially is going into your world. And I know why the boxing media is territorial about this, and they feel kind of, you know, they feel like this is infringing on their space. But I feel like we kind of have a more level-headed approach to all of it. On the whole, the MMA media is saying, yeah, this is crazy, but it's going to be a fun ride. The boxing media seems to be taking this very personally.
I mean, I think we're kind of looking at two different events in a sense. The MMA media and anybody surrounding MMA, the fans, everybody, they're looking at a guy who is at the top of this sport, who has the courage and also the wherewithal to go across into another man's sport, not just any other man, but a guy who's at the top of his sport and challenge him in his game. That's something. Now, on the other side of it, the boxing media is looking at Floyd Mayweather, who hasn't fought in 2 years, 49-0. And, you know, now he's going to try to go to 50-0, you know, make Rocky Marciano roll over in his grave. Floyd wants to go 50-0, and how's he going to do it? He's going to fight against some guy from MMA who's 0-0 as a boxer. I understand why boxing writers are looking at this as a joke. I mean, I get that. I don't think that they have any obligation.
To not even cover it? I mean, it is a sanctioned fight.
Well, you on the MMA Hour, you had Josh Gross talking about the Ali versus Inoki. I'm guessing, I don't know for a fact, but I'm guessing a lot of boxing.
That was in a pro boxing match. This is going on his record.
It is, but
what if he got knocked out and you're not there?
Yeah. Well, you know what?
You know what I mean? What if?
Yeah. I mean, you're right.
They're not. It's not a real. Any boxing writer who's like, I'm not covering this. Boy, you are a dumb ass. Your editors are going to make you, and if you work by yourself, you are missing a gold mine opportunity.
At that point,
right.
No, I mean, come on. Well, here's the thing. I did speak to Bernard Hopkins this week. Now he has a financial incentive because he is a minority owner of Golden Boy. Okay, but hear me out. He made a point. It's at least worth considering. I don't agree, but it's at least worth considering. Namely, that part of what's happening with this Mayweather-McGregor event is that it is in contrast to Triple G Canelo in close proximity, which by any measurement is about as good as boxing gets.
Yeah.
Real boxing. And I don't, again, B-Hop has a financial incentive to say this, but he was saying, I am tired of boxing being the red light district of sports. I am tired of this being the sport where you can do things like this, where you can just make this ridiculous spectacle. You can't actually do this in other sports because of the way they're set up and the way the architecture works.
In MMA.
I was going to say MMA.
Yeah.
Well, I think he meant non-combat sports.
Okay.
I don't think he was thinking about MMA. But this is the same kind of thing. What he's looking for is a little bit more in his mind respectability. Now, there's a debate about whether or not it is a respectability issue, but I can semi-understand where he's coming from.
But do boxing writers necessarily need to be covering a spectacle? I mean, I think that all those media outlets that have boxing writers, the outlets should be sending somebody there. But I could understand them not sending their regular boxing writer, but sending a feature writer or somebody who can wrap their brain around the spectacle of it all. You know, boxing writers.
It's still a boxing
their job,
match, though. It's still a boxing match. You're missing the boat.
They still have to fight when this is all over.
This is the thing.
Yeah,
it's happening. It's not. If it was like if they were doing sumo wrestling, then I get it. But they're not.
What is the interesting thing about this? To me, it's when the opening bell sounds. That's not really the most interesting part of the whole thing. I think the real interesting thing is how this whole thing, you know.
I disagree with that as well. Don't you want to see what happens? I mean, come the fourth round.
That's the final chapter. That's the final chapter in a bigger story. I mean, I could see somebody writing a really interesting story about all the twists and turns of the promotion, and then the final chapter is, you know, and then Floyd, you know, basically stood there in the corner for 12 rounds and Conor couldn't land a punch, or something else, or the opposite happens. But to me, I think because this is a spectacle, it does allow for the possibility of being covered differently than a typical boxing match.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more on that.
And it's besides, we keep talking about just MMA media and boxing media. It's all the in-between. It's the hot takers and all that stuff, which makes it also really funny. Because I saw a little thing on, I think it was, pardon the interruption, with Wilbon, and they were talking about McGregor as if he may pull some shenanigans in there and do something like he's coming from like prison or something. I was like, he's not coming from prison, and it's like the guy is such a principled person when it really comes down to it. He takes his defeats well. Everything about him is very, very thought out, but he is not any kind of thug or something crazy who's going to go in there and break the rules.
He did throw bottles and stuff.
Okay, well, I mean, there's things like that, but he's not
in the ring.
Not going to go in there and do something crazy. I can't imagine. I know initially you were like, he may go in there and throw a kick just to send a warning, like, you know, to put it near his face, just to be like, hey, I can do this if I want to, but I honestly I think he doesn't operate that way. I just think it's funny that the people who don't really pay attention to him have him pegged coming from this, you know, dastardly world of MMA, this crazy. I'm like, come on.
That's also not part of his self-belief system. I think his self-belief is such that he believes, unlike many other people who are following this spectacle, he believes he's going to go out there and he's going to beat Floyd Mayweather at his own game. He believes it.
We have 2 more months to talk about this. We are up against the clock. I want to quickly ask you about Germaine Durandamy. She was officially stripped on Monday morning. She is no longer the UFC's women's featherweight champion. It's now going to be Chris Cyborg against Megan Anderson for the vacant title on July 29th. How does she rebound, and can she rebound from this? Because essentially she said, I don't want to fight Cyborg, and they stripped her. And then she said, I found out online, which I have a hard time believing that she didn't know. Maybe she didn't know it was going to happen that morning, but you kind of saw the writing on the wall. She even said it herself. If you want me to fight her, strip me. Can she rebound from this?
No.
Is it over?
I mean, I don't think her career is over, but in terms of, look, I put it out on Twitter. I said, I think you helped participate in this one. Name an athlete whose biggest failure ended up defining them, you know, like a Bill Buckner or something. This is going to be hers, man. Because look, at bantamweight, she was good and competitive, but not great. She had a strong performance, I'd say, relatively speaking, against Holly Holm. Controversial as it though it may be with the scoring and then the shots after the bell, that was the high watermark. So now the thing she is known the most for, by far, is this rather, frankly, disgraceful period that she's now rebounding from. I don't know how you come back from that.
Yeah, this is worse than no mas. I mean, at least Roberto Duran was in the ring and getting beat up before he said that. This is like the fight had not even started yet, had not even been made yet. There had not even been a bout agreement, and she already was running for the hills.
It just runs afoul with everything that it's supposed to be about. You know what I mean? You go in there, and again, like I've said, it was all laid out pretty clearly that this fight is happening for this belt, and there's only one person behind it, and that's actually the person who we're creating this division around. So for her to even compete in, if she knew she was going to, or if she, whatever the thing is, you know that she knew she was going to have to fight Chris Cyborg if she won. And it's just one of those things, man. Like she didn't, like you said, it was a strong performance, but it was controversial. If she went in there and made it emphatic and then did this, maybe there would be a little bit of a different thing. But honestly, she has done nothing right along the way. I mean, you can't really look at any redeeming spot for her.
And this is someone who was pegged to be a true challenger to Cyborg. This is someone who has competed against a man.
That's kind of
combat sports fight.
That's the sad part.
She is talented.
She's talented.
That's the sad part. It would have actually been a pretty decent fight. Like you think about it in prospect, you think, well, that fight's pretty good, just given their styles and everything. But
and the sad part is she developed a reputation in the kickboxing world, the Iron Lady. You know what I mean?
Yes. Right.
She was a hard ass.
She was the Anderson Silva, right?
And then she came over here, and this is a weird turnabout.
I feel like.
But it must be said. It must be said that the UFC's announcement that the belt had been stripped contained its own sense of irony, talking about how a champion must defend the belt against the top contenders for the integrity of the game, unless in your division,
yes.
Unless you happen to be, Demetrius Johnson, because we want you to fight a bantamweight. Unless you happen to be Michael Bisping and you want to avenge that knockout loss from 7 years ago. Unless you're what's the other one?
Best fighter of the year nominee.
Unless you're Conor McGregor, who doesn't want to defend any belts to anybody. I mean, it's
I
like
was surprised they chose that wording because it felt like it was opening up.
Well, I know why, Ariel, because nothing matters.
Okay.
That's why. Nothing matters.
So, but obviously now we're getting Cyborg and Megan Anderson. That's great. Holly Holm was successful in Singapore. Would you like to see her fight the winner of that fight? Would you like to see her go back up? Is she back? Because I said she's back, and then I got a bunch of people who said, well, she beat Bethe Correia. She's not back. She's still one of the biggest draws. She's still one of the biggest faces, the names. I mean, she's kind of back, right?
I feel good for her.
Yeah.
Going through what she did. I mean, you could look at it, her losses, but, a couple of them, like she's winning the one against Miesha Tate and has a turnaround on the end. There's the controversy in her title fight there. I mean, it's not like she was just knocked out 3 times in a row, boom, boom, boom. So I feel good. I feel good for her. I do feel like she's back. I think that's the proper word. She's back. She wanted to get a win. I feel like she's back,
She won in an emphatic fashion against an opponent who she probably was going to beat anyway, but she did it with authority. And there's not a lot of popular attraction. She's one of them. Here we go.
So much respect for the way she just kept coming and coming and coming. Not in that particular fight, but loss after loss.
She knew what she had to get done.
She didn't hide. And
she said she expected the booze, so she did her game plan.
That was really impressive. All right, we're out of time. We have a hard out today because they're getting ready for an NBA draft show. It's the draft tonight, so we're very excited about that. But for now, we shall say goodbye. We appreciate.
Porzingis is still on.
Please don't bring anything up about Porzingis or the Knicks. I knew the second I said NBA draft.
He's going to look good in green. I got to tell you, man.
That James Dolan, he knows how to run a franchise.
I'm going to take this cup right here and smash it over your heads. All right, we are out. Hope you enjoyed our new studio. So excited about this. Want to thank everyone in the back, all the great people at Vox Media who worked so hard to make this happen. We sincerely appreciate it. We appreciate your support, the fans, the viewers out there who have been watching the show for 150 plus episodes now.
Wow.
The train continues to roll along. We shall say goodbye for now. It is a fun weekend of MMA coming up with Bellator at MSG and, of course, the UFC in Oklahoma City. So enjoy that. But for now, for Luke, Chuck, Jeff, I am Ariel. Again, thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the fights. We'll see you next week.